Welcome back to the Family Business Show and my special guest, Andrew Mostyn from the Craig Mostyn Group. Andrew, we've been talking already a little bit about the history and some of the family involvement and what the family business has actually done over time. Over the 96 years of the family being in business, I'm sure there have been some challenges faced by the family along the way. Would you like to share one or two little anecdotes with us?
Well, there's been a couple of world wars and a depression. A lot of things happen in the agricultural industry, like floods and droughts, foreign exchange issues. It's not an easy industry to actually be in. I think also our diversity through those years did cause some concerns for the business. You've got to remember that they weren't as run as professionally in the past as what they are today. We bought and sold businesses, I don't say on a whim, but certainly done very quickly without due diligence and so forth. So as a matter of, I guess, course, we've certainly got in and out of some businesses that perhaps we didn't want to be in or shouldn't have been in, but at the same time we wouldn't be the business today that we are unless we were sort of involved in some of those. But certainly in the 70s, I hadn't joined the business. I didn't join until 86, but in the 70s I know that we came under some pretty tough financial situations. We had to get in an advisor, sort of a chartered accountant, to really run the ruler over the business and come up with quite a detailed, very thick plan that was going to be suitable to the bank to continue to sort of have the borrowings and so forth that we were. And I think it'd be fair to say that we wouldn't have survived that particular era without going external and getting that advice. And I suppose that then set us on a bit of a course for always maintaining external relationships with sort of trusted advisors, be it accountants, be it lawyers. We obviously improved the way that we started to do business acquisitions and transactions and professionalised, I guess, ourselves from that period on. So yeah, I guess the most significant was probably in that area. Our prawning activities up in the Gulf of Carpentaria probably dragged on a little bit longer than what they should have. It was a passion of my grandfather. Often a problem with family businesses is that you do get very attached to a particular business and it's hard to let go. And certainly he sort of introduced a new rule into the company, or my father introduced the rule, 72, you're out. So my grandfather certainly extended past that period, and so we saw that unless we did have a line in the sand, I suppose, as to a date, an age, you could call it a fair one, you may not call it a fair one. There's plenty of young 72-year-olds out there, but I think it was just good to be able to introduce that so that over the time after, in the last 20 years, we probably invoked that rule a couple of times just to encourage somebody to move on and out of the business. And we've become a little less dedicated to certain business units. You've just got to be a little bit hard-nosed about these things, and you can't hold on to business units if they're not going to give you a future and an acceptable return.
Is the 72 rule documented anywhere, or is it written into contracts that employees might sign?
I think some people think it's actually in our constitution, and I don't think it is, but I'm happy that they think that. But to be fair, my father, at 72 on the date, he retired as chairman of the board. He'd set the rule up. He was happy to live by that rule. So to his credit, he certainly didn't envisage or contemplate extending that one bit. But no, it's not sort of hard and fast, but it's an accepted rule, and quite frankly, it's one that's been good for us in a couple of instances.
In a couple of instances, is that with other family members, or is it more long-term staff that are committed to the family or the business? I see a commitment to both sides.
Oh, it hasn't been family. As I said, my father was the first family member to come up to that age and to live by that rule, but we have had a few others. One other example was a 90-year-old gentleman, Alan Scales, who was on our James Bowes board, and at 90 years old, he'd come into a meeting, he'd repeat the same stories to me that he'd repeated the last few meetings. Often his car would somehow find its way rolling out of the car park and things like that because he hadn't put the brake on. Just little things like that sort of give you an indication that perhaps time's up for being on the board. And on that one occasion, I do recall being there, and we were going to ask him to leave the board on that particular day, his 90th birthday or thereabouts. And I saw him pull out a bit of paper, and that was his thanks to the company for a long time serving of the company, and he was happy to move on. So the 72-year-old rule didn't apply on his situation, but it's a good example of why there should be something in there.
I totally agree. I'm interested, because the business has been so long-standing and the businesses are extensively trading and making good business, looking towards the technology changes that you've been facing. I'm sure that these industries of the protein production, whether it be fishing or abalone or beef or lamb or pork, there's technological change. How do you stay up with that to stay current?
Well, look, you mentioned the word trading, and we have always been a trading company for the first sort of 50, 60 years. There's much less and less of that happening right now. It's just a little bit too difficult to put yourself in that situation where you're buying and selling a commodity, hope to make a decent margin, and hope that others aren't doing exactly the same thing, which a lot of the barriers to entry are pretty small and can easily be overcome. So we've really moved away from the traditional trading side of things, and there's very little about. We do a little bit of protein trading, but we're out of fruit and vegetables. We're out of the seafood trading that we used to do, and we're now running some big businesses that have got automation, have got IT, have got large barriers to entry. It's important to put yourself into that sort of situation in today's climate, and be a low-cost producer as well. You can't just be out there and competing with others that are supplying the Coles and the Woolies and the overseas markets that we're doing, unless you can be a low-cost producer and in a situation of being able to match against others.
When we talk about the challenges, you mentioned a couple of wars and trading, international trading financially. Has there been anything that in your time that you can probably put a finger on as something that was a challenge for you personally?
Oh, we've certainly had business units that have been a challenge, there's no question about that, for different reasons. One was a catering business that we catered to the airlines, and over 50% of our business was solely to Ansett Airlines. And of course, most people know the story that Ansett went bust. That business went bust pretty soon after that. It just couldn't make up the difference of such a big customer base. So, lesson to be learnt there, don't hold on to a business that's got such a reliance on a particular customer, even though a large customer that you would have thought was safe clearly wasn't. So we wouldn't enter into businesses these days that were so reliant on a particular customer or customers. We've got a lot more stringent criteria for the businesses that we would look at, and in particular businesses that we wouldn't look at. So we're very much a protein business these days, and we think we're a protein solutions company that will be able to cater to all kinds of areas within that protein base, which is both human and pet food consumers, and we see that as our future going forward.
So is one of the challenges staying within that format and doing acquisitions and looking for acquisitions that may come up from time to time? Is that a particular challenge?
Acquisitions in the right space, and not to spend time wasting on areas that we just don't have any interest in. So I think it's just as important to be able to say no to something and move on, and then target the areas that you think would be there for the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think we'll take another break and we will come back shortly. I just want to thank our sponsors for today, and today's sponsor is Tech, the Executive Connection.